Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
WisconsinEye coverage of the 2018 elections continues at the Milwaukee Public Library. Republican Representative Dale Kooyenga of Brookfield is a candidate in the 5th Senate District. Dale, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
I've covered you. You have big ideas. So let's just start. You care about trying to help MPS. Mm-hmm. You offered a plan. Are you going to offer another plan? Anything in the works for MPS? Can you give us a hint?
You want a hint? Well, we have a lot of stakeholders in Milwaukee Public Schools. I think we need to look at the entire education system and continue to strive for better performance. What's been really great, though, since 2011 when Republicans took over, is that by nearly every single metric, our education system is better in Wisconsin than it was back then. Our graduation rates are up. We have more accountability by evidence by everyone taking the ACT score now. So I want to work with stakeholders within Milwaukee Public Schools to make sure we do better. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm not going to give up for the kids in Milwaukee. A quarter of them not graduating high school, and that's just first and foremost not acceptable for them as far as what they wanted to do in their life and what opportunities they have. And then also as an economy, we need those individuals to be part of our economy.
Well, as a member of Joint Finance, if you remain on Joint Finance in the Senate, this budget increases K-12 aids. Do you think we need a similar, pretty significant bump in K-12 aids in the next budget, Dale?
I think we need to keep promoting policies that promote economic growth, and we've been doing that since 2011. And if you do that, you could have your cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is, if we continue to have the economic growth we're having, we could continue to invest in our schools, and we could continue to cut taxes.
Choice grew. I've been watching it grow from Milwaukee, Racine, statewide. Mm-hmm. Does it need to expand further? Would you support expanding it further?
Yeah, I think we look at it. I mean, we need to make sure that it's a program that makes tremendous sense for those that are looking for new opportunities in education. And so I think there's an opportunity to streamline some of those programs now that we have 3 of them, and see what we could do to maybe move towards one program and talk about what makes sense on that front. You
offered a very detailed plan to break the impasse, the gridlock in transportation fund.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that would have been the best way to do that?
Well, I haven't seen any alternatives that are, there have not been a lot of plans put out there as far as what we do. So I'm encouraged by the fact that there's a lot of Republicans in the building, and there's a lot of Republicans that are quick to put their opinion out there. And there was actually one Republican in the whole building that came out with any negative comment on the whole plan in its entirety, and it wasn't the governor. So that's good. And so I think a lot of Republicans kept their powder dry. If you look at it, it wasn't just a transportation plan, but it was also a tax plan that got us to a flat income tax in Wisconsin. Right. It put more resources towards our roads. It made the transportation fund stand on its own. Right now, the general fund is subsidizing the transportation fund. Mm-hmm. That's the opposite of what was going on when we took over, where the transportation fund was subsidizing the general fund. So we need to make sure that transportation fund stand on its own. And when we do that, we'll have additional money in the general fund, and with that additional money, we can cut taxes. So I think we need to do more on our roads. We have made progress on the condition of our roads if you look at independent engineering studies, but we've not made progress on the solvency of the transportation fund. And I'm a CPA, I'm a very fiscal conservative guy. We need to do better on making sure our transportation fund is solvent and making sure our infrastructure is ready for the 21st century, because our economy, our tourism industry, and just simply dads like myself who are going from downtown Milwaukee and want to spend time with my 4 kids, we want to get home soon. We don't want to be sitting in traffic.
When I was in Eau Claire interviewing candidates just last week, one of your comrades, Mr. Petrick, said he told you he couldn't give a short explanation of your plan. Was that a major drawback? I mean, that it was so detailed, he couldn't give a short summary of it?
Well, complicated problems sometimes need complicated solutions. I don't think it was that complicated. And as legislators, we have a responsibility to give in details, right, and then summarize it to people in our district. So if someone was struggling with how to summarize in their district, I think we did a really good job in this district because we heard a lot of positive feedback on it.
You would have dialed, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we think it's pretty simple. What we did is we made sure the fund was standing on its own. What we would have said is that there is a minimum markup law in Wisconsin.
Right, you would have dialed that back.
We would have taken it off the table.
Taken it off the table.
Right now, the law says that gas has to be marked up 9%. That is very unique to Wisconsin. There's no other product outside of alcohol and tobacco where the law says you have to mark up your product this amount in the law. If we take that off our books, we will have the market prices of gasoline fall more to 2-3% range like they are in the rest of the country, which will lower the price of gas. And that gives us flexibility to broaden our base because right now gas is not subject to sales tax, put that money towards our infrastructure, and overall do an income tax cut because we no longer are subsidizing transportation funds. So I know there's some moving pieces in there, but these are complicated problems. No one else had put out a plan.
I know.
There's no other plan. No. And we're here to solve problems. And so I'm not tied, I'm not married to that exact plan. And there's already elements of that plan that were already adopted into law in pieces. And so I'll be working with my colleagues, if I have the honor to represent the Senate district, to make sure that we move towards solutions.
That plan didn't raise a gas tax. Do you still think we don't need to raise a gas tax, Dale?
That plan did not raise the gas tax. No, I think we need to look at other alternatives because even with that plan, there were some things we need to talk about long term. And I always give the example of I saw a Tesla on 94 with Illinois plates.
Yep.
How does a Tesla with Illinois plates pay for our roads? I mean, they're not because they're not paying vehicle registration, they're not paying gas taxes, they're not paying for that road. So, this is a long-term problem that we need to deal with. And it's your blessings sometimes they create problems. One of the good things is we're having more fuel efficiency, and some cars don't even have fuel efficiency. It's a calculation doesn't even work because they're running on electric. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for infrastructure. Because as one of my friends pointed out is that if you're conservative or liberal, if you're socialist or communist or whatever you are, even libertarian, is everyone believes that it's a core function of government to have a transportation system. The only ones that don't believe that are anarchists, and I've not met any of those in Wisconsin.
The buzz in the Capitol on tolling, I don't think you're a fan because wouldn't that involve investing hundreds of millions to redesign our highway system? Anyway, tolling.
Well, it's a moot point right now, is that we can't do tolling even if we wanted to because Congress has said that we can't. Congress would have to grant that power to the states, and I don't see a lot of momentum right now in Congress for that. If that was on the table, then we should discuss it. But with it not being on the table, I don't think we should cloud the issue by saying that's even an alternative. If the governor thinks that is a practical alternative, then him and some of the other leadership need to lobby Congress for a change in that law.
Local governments have been living with levy limits since 2006. Some local government leaders say it hurts their ability to provide local services. Loosen or get rid of levy limits?
Well, that's politics. It sounds like it's always a black and white yes or no answer. I think it's more complicated than that. As you are aware, there's already exceptions for if you have growth in your community, if your levy assessed value increases, you have more flexibility. I'm more than willing to listen to arguments for flexibility. I don't think we completely say that you could do whatever you want, although a fan of local control. Politically, people hold the elected officials in Madison accountable for the local property taxes, which is interesting because we no longer assess property taxes. We used to like 1% of your bill was the state property tax.
Forestry tax.
We eliminated that. So technically the state is out of the property tax business, but voters aren't going to accept that. So voters do want to see some type of curb. They want to see affordable housing, and that's in part with property taxes by keeping them low. And so I'm willing to have those conversations, but I think that the voters still expect that property taxes do not significantly increase or decrease still.
Mass shootings, school shootings, we need any changes in Wisconsin gun laws, sir?
Yeah, I'm open to changes in Wisconsin gun laws. As you're aware, we did a large grants for schools to look at school safety. I'm also one who really respects the Second Amendment. And since I respect the Second Amendment, I think we need to make certain curbs to our gun laws to make sure that we could actually not have that amendment threatened in the long term. And what I mean by that is I don't see that background checks for individuals is abandoning the Second Amendment. I think that's a reasonable accommodation. It is a small inconvenience, but it's a small inconvenience that we could absorb in order to make sure that those that have guns should have guns in the first place. And so I think that there's rooms for improvement in Wisconsin gun laws, but generally speaking, I think we've been very responsible in Wisconsin with our gun laws. We did concealed carry, which I believe has made much of Wisconsin safer. But I'm very open to discussions on what we could do for school safety. But at the end of the day, I believe that we're making progress, and I think our gun laws are probably in a good spot, although there's room for improvement.
A big issue in the next budget will be whether we need a new prison, with Waupun and Green Bay built in the 1800s and closing the 2 juvenile prisons. Do we need a new state prison?
That's a larger conversation on criminal justice, but you talk about DUIs, and our state has a DUI problem. We have a lot of people out there, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th DUIs, and that's just unacceptable. We just talked about guns. Drunk drivers are just as dangerous in our state as guns. And so when you go to resolve those issues, you get to a point where your back's against the wall. The only option is to really incarcerate people that absolutely refuse to be sober and or not drive. And so at some point we need to look at those relationships between the amount of jails we have, what do our drunk driving laws look like, what is the appropriate amount of time for sentencing. And I'm a fan of criminal justice reform, but at the same time, there's this false perception out there that we have our jails full of people that bought a little marijuana. That's not accurate. We don't have jails full of people that were caught with a little bit of marijuana. Generally speaking, our jails are full of folks that we don't want in our society, murderers, rapists. And so when you take a look at that, I'm always looking for, show me a sympathetic person that's in jail that shouldn't be in jail. Show me a sympathetic person. And based on those sympathetic cases, let's work backwards towards criminal justice reform and see if there's opportunities to reform our system to make sure that jails are for people that should be separated from society and rehabilitated. But I don't see a lot of those sympathetic cases coming to my attention, but always open for discussion, see where we can go from there.
Does your criminal justice reform interest include the sad fact that Wisconsin leads the nation in incarceration of African Americans?
I mean, that's part of it, but once again, I want to see, let's not judge our policies based on, should we change our policies because the data at this level says that this is a problem? I think we should change our policies, like show me the individuals within that group that you're concerned about, and then let's work backwards and say, okay, why is he in jail? Is this an appropriate sentence for what has happened? But let's end the conversation where we began it, is that we're less likely to have these problems if we work on education. So let's make sure that the Milwaukee Public Schools are performing, and let's make sure that they are graduating students that are enlightened and have other things to do, like meaningful work, versus getting in trouble, which ends up to incarceration.
You were part of the CPA caucus that found the $1 billion plus in unused funds in the UW system. Do we need to continue for a 7th and 8th year the freeze on resident undergrad tuition?
Well, at a certain point, we need to look at the tuition amounts, and we need to have universities be affordable. But on the flip side, we also need to have students with equity in their own education. And that doesn't mean that we ramp up huge amounts of debt for our students. It also doesn't mean we have free university. So somewhere in that mix of having affordable schools and it shouldn't be free is Wisconsin students that use UW system should have to put some skin in the game, but it shouldn't be so much skin in the game where they can't get married or start a family or start a business when they're 20s. And so long term, we need to look at what's the formula for tuition increases. I don't know if now is the time for that, but I think at some point our policy cannot be tuition freezes in perpetuity.
It's been a few months since you voted for the Foxconn tax breaks, tax incentives. Based on what's happened in the last few months, do you still support it?
Absolutely. There's a lot of excitement around the Foxconn. I voted for it for a number of different reasons. Is every single academic institution, whether it be private schools like Marquette or public schools like UW, they unanimously said the Foxconn investment is an extension of our academic culture here in Wisconsin. where if you want to make sure that our young people are staying in Wisconsin, we need to have industries of the 21st century. And they're more likely to have our students stay here, more likely to have programs that are tailored for that industry that we would not have if those jobs were only in Asia. And speaking of only in Asia, this is an industry. This isn't poaching a company from that side of the border to this side of the border, which is a zero-sum game for our country. This is an entire industry coming to America. It's an entire industry coming to the free world. And that industry is one that's going to involve other industries. It's going to involve automobiles. It's going to involve healthcare. And so Wisconsin is now on the forefront of that new technology. And what does it represent? The individuals that make the Foxconn decision, they could put their money anywhere in the world. They could invest in anything in the world. But the fact that they invested in America, in Wisconsin, says that very smart people who have been successful in the business world say that this is where things are happening, this is where growth is, and this is where they want to place their bets.
You mentioned healthcare. 2 questions on that. Does state government have a role in making making sure that we can recruit and retain physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we got to maintain a world-class healthcare system, and we do that by supporting universities with places like University of Wisconsin-Madison that has a teaching hospital or a medical college of Wisconsin here. But we want to make sure we have the best and brightest. We want to make sure that the best and brightest, that when they leave from medical school, which they often do, and then come back, that this is a place they want to be. And so I have a lot of friends that are physicians, and I'm very confident that we are attracting the best and brightest, but we'll continue to have policies that make sure they can stay here. One of the great examples of that, I talked to my friend who's a pediatrician, and he moved all over before they settled in Wisconsin. One of the policies we have in place now that keeps physician friends here is that if you're in Illinois, their liability for malpractice is unlimited. Mm-hmm. Any single judge on any single case or any single jury could make their life miserable for the rest of their life by saying, okay, in our opinion, you've messed up and that's going to cost you $25 million, whatever the amount is.
Entering a large judgment.
Which creates their insurance policy extremely high, which is like a tax. In Wisconsin, we have the Patient Compensation Fund, extremely successful, and our physicians are able to operate without having this burden on their back of always being paying out huge premiums for insurance or being subject to huge court decisions.
The debate, the proposal to legalize either recreational marijuana or medical marijuana, where are you on those?
I'm very open to talking about medical marijuana, if that makes sense. There's our individuals that are fighting cancer or other ailments that will be very nauseated, very sick. I think we need to talk about if we could contain medical marijuana to that population. We don't want to see what happened like with opiates, where it spilled outside of that prescription state and led to huge problems. But I am sensitive to the fact that there are people really sick out there that want to spend time with their family or read a book or just not be sick, and they feel as if it makes them less nauseous and less sick. And so I'm very open to that debate. I think as far as legalizing cannabis across the whole, or marijuana across the whole state, I just don't think we're ready for that. You look at Colorado, you look at other states, there's been workforce issues, there's been dropout issues. I just don't think the jury's out on that that's a good idea. And so I think we need to pause that, but we need to have a conversation about medical marijuana, get more feedback from the healthcare community, and see if that makes sense for Wisconsin. 2
final questions. When you say on your campaign website that your work on taxes is not done, what do you mean?
Not done. We're still a high-tax state.
What's your top priority and from a tax standpoint next session?
Yeah, well, it's a triage because there's all sorts of different options there. But our income tax rate for a lot of our job creators, the top one is 7.65. That's still over 50% higher than Illinois, which we compete with. And just our middle-class families are also paying a significant burden of taxes still. We still have fairly high income tax rates. Property taxes could go down. Our sales tax mix is probably appropriate, but there's definitely room for improvement there. And we're doing that by having economic growth, and when we have economic growth, that economic growth shouldn't lead to growth in government. It should lead back to the people that create economic growth, and that's the guy who's swinging a hammer, and that's the guy who's hiring the people swinging the hammer to make sure they keep more of the money in their houses and in their businesses.
Final question, do you want to highlight differences between you and your opponent on November 6th?
Yeah, actually, that's for the voters to decide. I have a very smart district, and they will do the compare and contrast, and I'll let them answer that question.
Thank you. Republican Representative Dale Kooyenga of Brookfield. is a candidate in the 5th Senate District. Dale, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks, Steve.
November 6th is the election.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.